wasn't a good, I recognize that one.
Yeah.
Now what are you fuddling with?
I don't know. Is it working?
So, yeah, we were supposed to get the results Friday.
That's what I thought. I know we signed. I'm working on it.
I'm sorry, your device is tuned down and that will no longer be functioning.
So why didn't it flip? All right, hold on. People are watching this, so don't say anything incriminating.
Mike, you need to answer the phone. Get right on there.
I'm not saying a word about it. I'm just,
Hang on.
trying to figure out why it won't flip.
Yeah. All right. Got everybody in, so why can't I do it this way? Rotate your phone. You can't turn your phone while recording. That's awesome. Okay, so I'm gonna have to back up so I can get you all in it. And keep it plugged in now. So, okay, we're live. There's 17 people already watching, so.
Wonderful. All right, welcome everybody. This is our first version, first attempt at this. We're going to label these Pre-Tech 101. First off, we got to thank Mike Miller, automatic transmission specialist. Mike graciously allowing us to use the shop today as the backdrop for the first of these. And we hope to be doing, by the way, a number of these in the future, division specific. First order of business, introductions. Of course, myself, Jerry Priestkin, with Beaver Dam Raceway. Joining us today, we have our inspection staff, a couple of them, Jim Tremblay. Jim, multi-talented, also inspects down at Slinger regularly, so Jim sees a lot of race cars through the course of the summer. Dave Casper, Dave, an enigma on the Wisconsin racing scene. So many years, both at Beaver Dam, Fox River, Oshkosh, countless other ones. Dave, we worked at Chilton together too, so again, a great wealth of information. Chris Shepard handling the technical aspects of this. Thank you, Chris. We appreciate your help with this. We're just going to jump right in then and touch on today's topic is just really safety equipment. Dave, we talked on our agenda, really first order of business, the first thing we go to be looking at, seatbelts.
Yeah, really one of the primary first line of defense kind of items that everybody needs to be cognizant of using correctly, mounting correctly, and having the right equipment for the job. To that end, I just want to spend 2 seconds talking about SFI. Those are the folks that put the tag or authorize the use of the tag that's on your gloves, your helmet, your shoes, your racing suit, and certainly your seat belts. Those tags indicate that the manufacturer of that equipment has applied the specifications that SFI has set for ensuring that that equipment is going to do the job that it needs to do to protect you. And recently there's been a change in how those tags look. In the past, especially on seat belts, the tags were punched with a punch tool that indicated the date and year under which those seat belts were certified. And then you had a certain amount of time to go through that certification, and then they would have to either be recertified or replaced. Those tags as of 2017 look a lot differently. They got rid of the punch system because it costs money for people to have punch equipment. And they wanted to have a more modern, easy to use, especially for inspectors with bad eyes like me, better, easier to read tags. So the new tags have a born-on date, and then beneath that, they have a date at which you should either replace that equipment or have it recertified. To my knowledge, there is only one manufacturer that recertifies or reweaves seat belts. They're extremely expensive. They're a European company. Most every other domestic seatbelt manufacturer, safety equipment manufacturer, would rather have you spend less money and get more utility out of buying a new set of seatbelts. So that's really what's going on. SFI tags, for your information, set a maximum useful life for seatbelts of 2 years. If you look at most Wisconsin racetracks now, they allow you to use a set of seatbelts for 3 years. I think that perhaps in the future that may change, but as of now, most tracks would like to see you replace seatbelts at the end of 3 years. Question is, why do they do that? Well, the reason they do that is they wear out. There's almost 30 years of testing that indicates that after 2 years, seatbelts, depending on which material they're made out of, lose between 50 and 60% of their useful life. And certainly more if they're put through bad, harsh use conditions or they're not well taken care of. So we're not making this stuff up when we look at your seatbelts and ask you to replace them. It's based on really hard science over a long period of time. So talking about seatbelts, we'd like to talk about the do's and don'ts of seatbelts. One of the things that we talk about a lot when we look at your cars and that we look at that maybe you haven't had anyone bring your attention to in the past is how the seatbelt hardware is actually attached to the seatbelt. Here's an example of a seatbelt attached to a mounting tab incorrectly. And the reason that it's incorrect is that this tab should be brought back underneath this part of the buckle and like this to prevent sliding. Now, while this is wrapped correctly, it's still not acceptable because according to SFI's recommendations and all the manufacturer's recommendations, this tab should be sticking through here a minimum of 4 inches. So here we have an example of that situation. This is a properly wrapped and woven seatbelt attachment, and of course the loop here is where this would be wrapped around the roll bar. The other thing that we want to point out when we look at seatbelts is we look at general condition before we even look at the date tag. Because as I said before, 2 to 3 year life, based on SFI and manufacturer's recommendations, is one thing, but condition trumps everything else. So, thanks, Jim. One of the things that we will look at initially is what is the condition of the stitching? Is there anything frayed? Are the stitches crushed in any way? Is there indication that a row of stitching is getting loose? We'll look at the margins of the placard that the stitching is on to make sure that they're rectangular and in nice straight rows. We'll look at the edges of the belt where it attaches to any hardware to make sure, like in this case, that it's folded correctly so that it can't rack back and forth. Racking immediately puts an undue amount of stress on one edge and will cause that seatbelt to tear. We look at the general condition of the hardware itself. Is there any signs of denting? Are they straight and linear? Is the hardware all in good appearing condition? Very, very important. We look at the material of the belt itself. You'll often see us roll it in our hand. Does it feel old and crunchy and crusty? Well, that indicates that that belt is had some severe exposure, maybe to some chemicals. We look for grease spots, indications of bleaching from harsh chemicals, acids, if it's been around a battery, if it's been exposed to petroleum, etc. So all of those things are as an important factor as what it says on the date code. And by the way, here's an example of a belt that's at the end of its certification life. It has the old style tag on it yet with the hole punched in it. One thing that people try to do sometimes is eliminate the punch to try to fool us into thinking the belt is newer. If an unpunched belt tag comes past us, we will immediately reject that seat belt because it's clearly got to be punched through. So I think those are the most important things about the belts. The next important thing, of course, is how the belts are installed. So we've got a racing seat here, and we've got the shoulder belts. Shoulder belts have to pass easily and directly through the opening in the seat, and where they're attached to the roll cage, which is the most preferred mounting method or attachment method with a direct wrap, that wrap should be at or slightly below the level of the top of the shoulder, so that the belt is at no more than a 20-degree angle, or above the shoulder so that that belt achieves no more than a 10-degree angle.
Also, as part of that, the belt should not be interfered with by the opening in the seat. The seat opening should also be hemmed, not a sharp edge, so as to not cause any deformation, fraying of the belt. Jim, you want to touch next on the lap belt?
Yep, the lap belts, when they come up, they want to go at an angle like this and catch your hip at a good angle. And also same thing down here, you want to make sure there's no sharp edges that are going to take that. And when you mount your belts, you want this bracket to be straight. Don't mount them like this, or I've seen some that are actually backwards like this. That does nothing for the strength of the seatbelt itself. It takes away all the strength of the belt, and it makes it a lot harder for the guys to get them tight.
In some of the beginner classes, we'll see competitors mounting belts to the floor.
Right.
That's an absolute no-no.
Right.
There's just no strength there. Belts need to be mounted to a structural frame component so that they're going to properly restrain the driver.
The other very important thing about mounting the belts, especially the lap belts, is that they don't contact anything other than your body. You don't want them going up over the lip of the seat, because what happens in a real hard front end crash is the belts will hold the seat in. Well, the seat is held in by itself. It's you that we want to hold in. So these need, and the other thing with putting them over the top of the seat is if the impact is high enough, they'll roll down and crush your hips. And that you don't want, and you'd be almost impossible to extricate from the race car.
On that note, Dave, we talked about the seat being mounted by itself. Jim, you want to touch on proper seat mounting?
Yes, you want to make sure you use at least grade 5 or better bolts. We recommend grade 8. Also, you want to use behind the bolt against the seat, but as big as you can, like a fender washer or a washer as big as you can, and that's going to help the head of that bolt from pulling through. So when you do get into a crash, that it doesn't pull, your seat doesn't pull through the bolt. I've seen a lot of guys with either none or very small. I mean, the more you can spread out the weight or the area that's going to pull on, the seat's going to pull on, the better off you're going to be.
Another common mistake that both of us, actually all of us, see is competitors, especially beginning competitors, using carriage bolts or round-headed machine screws. Neither of which is acceptable. They're generally grade 2, which is way too weak for something, a component as critical as this. Button head cap screw, coarse thread, fine thread preferred are great fasteners for this critical application.
Also, when you mount in your seat, you want from your chest line all the way down through your seat, through where the belt's